Our gospel lesson this morning is Matthew 2, 1 through 12, the famous story of the three wise men, or the Magi. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. This is the word of the Lord. Today we are celebrating Epiphany. This is the latter part of the Christmas season that includes this very, very important point, that the birth of Christ is for the Gentiles too. It's for all people. Now the church should strive to be like the star of Christ, a light that can help guide people to Christ. But if we are to be that light, it requires that we have followed the star to Bethlehem ourselves. And would it not be wonderful if that star were always present, always guiding us in the ways of Christ throughout life? But unfortunately, sometimes the star seems hidden, and we're not quite sure of the best route to take in the situations of our life. Now, the way of the Lord is wise, but we may end up only depending upon our own selves for guidance, and we may stumble forward in the darkness. I know we've all got stories of that stumbling. So what may be the darkness through which you stumble, or have stumbled in the past, or fear stumbling in the future? Well, hear the good news. The good news is that the light of Christ is there for you. And God's Word will guide you into a better place. So do not fear the darkness, but seek the light of Christ that may come right out of the midst of the darkness. You know, the wise men had their darkness. They were following the star, yes, but their darkness was Jerusalem. They went there to inquire about the location of the child who had been born King of the Jews. They wanted to go and worship him, to honor him, to pay him homage. Well, the king became frightened at that news, because if there was a new king who had been born, it would threaten his throne. He was a very literal thinker, right? did he do? He deceived the Magi. And in his deception, however, he actually gave them the right directions to Bethlehem. So God was at work right there. When have you found yourself in your own Jerusalem? When have you found yourself making inquiries about what path to take? Whether it be a new and meaningful relationship with God, or finding more about yourself, or finding some new path in life. Sometimes when we're in Jerusalem, we stumble into some deception or something that's unreliable. But you know what? That may be okay. Maybe it's a good time to take a step back from those times. Perhaps it was God at work in that situation, nudging you forward in ways you hadn't yet perceived. It's just like God used the king to give guidance to the Magi and send them on their way to Bethlehem. So being in Jerusalem, and sometimes having to struggle and having to find your way and inquire about your direction in life can be a good thing, even though it's uncomfortable, even though it may have some darkness or some deception or some confusion or some bad advice. God uses those times. God really uses those times to show us the way forward in the life of Christ. Our own journey to Bethlehem. Well, I want to share with you one of my Jerusalem darkness experiences. It was a long time ago. I had become a sophomore in college. I transferred from my original college to the University of Tennessee. And I did not know myself much then. My interior life was still waiting discovery. And I did not know what I wanted to do for a career, and I did not know what my major should be, and I was getting to the point of having to decide, what am I going to study? And I recalled that my father, when I was a very, very young child, told me that one summer he worked with the state in civil engineering. Now, he was not an engineer, but he was a very capable person who did lots of different kinds of things. Anyway, he worked with them for a summer on building roads. And he had given some thought to actually following through in that direction, but he did not. So I thought, well, gosh, maybe I'll try out engineering. And yeah, you're laughing already. Just wait, it gets worse. So I looked at all the possibilities at the big old giant university, and one caught my eye. It was engineering physics. Wow, what's that? I not only managed to think of one thing that I was no good at, I managed to get two in one fell swoop, engineering and physics. I mean, I never was really good at math. It was not my forte. Plus, my brain does not work in spatial relations in the external world. I can't imagine how machines work because it just doesn't click. So here I was, found myself in this small class and 20,000 students and 7 or 8 engineering physics people, you know. The teacher was somebody, I guess he was a rocket scientist or a nuclear scientist or something. He also worked at this very famous nuclear facility outside of Knoxville. And so there he was teaching us about engineering physics. And the main thing I remember about that is that he spent some time teaching us how a rocket ship, how to figure out how to get a rocket ship off the Earth into orbit and then slung around and using orbit to sling off toward the moon and then back. And I'll tell you, I'm sure that no astronauts ever wanted me to help them get to the moon and back. Then the other thing I had to take was mechanical drawing. Learning how to build plans for buildings and rooms and stuff like that. And, that wasn't so bad. But mainly the best thing I could do in there, I was really good at drawing the numbers. I was good at the number 2. I even got a compliment on my number 2. That was about it. Well, it didn't take me a whole semester to learn that I was stumbling in the darkness, not knowing what direction to go in. But I had to try. I began to get a little light when a friend of mine I discovered was a philosophy major. Now that may make most of you want to run away, but not me. I started finding out, what is this philosophy? And it was pretty interesting. I started discovering, I like this. My brain works more that way. And then toward the end of the semester, I had one of the most unusual spiritual experiences of my life. For some reason, in the middle of the day, I was in my dorm room doing something, and I was standing in the middle of the room, and all of a sudden I had a sense of someone's presence behind me. It was very palpable. Like if you ever find yourself alone in a building and it's dark at night, you're just like, somebody's right there, That's what it was like. And this was Jesus. I'm glad it was Jesus, not somebody else. And right away, Jesus said, bring forth fruit. And I actually turned around to see. I had to see if somebody was there. Of course there wasn't. And sometimes genuine religious experiences, spiritual experiences, do take a form other than just being subjective. Sometimes they take a kind of physical, external world form, but they're still very legitimate experience. And it was just what I needed, actually. Because I knew I wasn't going to be an engineering physics person. And I needed to learn to reflect a lot more, so I had to start thinking about, well, gosh, what is this fruit I am to bring forward? It wasn't peaches. It wasn't physical fruit. It was something else, some kind of fruit in my life. And so I had to start thinking about it and reflecting on it, and it helped me grow. And I actually then returned to my original college and discovered then history. Well, history was easy as falling off a log compared to engineering physics, let me tell you. Of course, later on, I realized how important history is, and it has its own complexities and significance. But I was discovering more about who I am and my direction, and I was getting more concerned about meaning in life. And, once you discover the liberal arts and you're all concerned about meaning in your life and your direction, well, theology can't be far behind. Then I discovered all these fruit images in the Bible. Oh, well, I can explore that. And so really that message, bring forth fruit, became a kind of star for me. And it has guided me. And I have answered the question of what is that fruit in different ways, in different periods of my life. And so, whatever your Jerusalem of darkness may be, know that the light of Christ is waiting there to be discerned. And look for glimpses of light, little flickers of light. Just my friend telling me he was a philosophy major was a flicker of light. Try to be open to the surprising presence of the Lord. And remain faithful and trusting God and always hopeful, even when you haven't left Jerusalem yet. For the word of the Lord will guide you down your pathway to Bethlehem. So as we come to the Lord's table today, let us pay homage to Christ, honoring Him and thanking Him for guidance into the way of salvation. And listen to His word for us, even today. And so may we have the courage like Christ as a church to enter dark places where people stumble and search. And may we find ways together to shine some light in those dark places. May we be part of Epiphany, letting all the world know that God is born into the world for them. Amen.